Hey, welcome everybody back to the Seidrkin podcast. I'm really, really excited for this one. This has been brewing for a while, as solar plexus stuff does, but this is a conversation with another fellow emotional projector who is also a 3-5, which I'm so excited about. But welcome to the podcast, Ellen. How are you? And do you want to say a little hi to all of the peeps?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I have also been very excited about this podcast and just really grateful to connect with another 3-5 emotional projector to share experience as third lines love to do. And yeah, I'm just curious where our conversation will take us today.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one. I feel like I want to set a little bit of a foundation of what we're speaking to so that we can just dive deep because I feel like there's so many questions that I have for you and I really am curious because feel like a fire hose trying to stem the flow, but you have one channel as a projector and it is emotional. So I feel like the transmission is going to be really interesting to be able to hear from you what you've lived and how that's been and just feel the wisdom. So I just wanted to throw out for a complete noob if anyone's listening and they're like, what are you even talking about with emotional stuff? So you guys know that I have this framework of human design. Ellen is well versed in that as well. So we're going to speak to that a lot. But when we're speaking about the emotional system within the human design lens, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Where am I? So I've got, can you see that all right on your side, Ellen? Can you see?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I've got both of our charts up here, and I did the same with the conversation I had with Griffin when we were speaking to the Ego Center, which is this one here. But I just want to point out the solar plexus on a chart. So if you've ever run your human design chart and you've seen all these crazy things up there, this is what we're speaking to. It's the right hand triangle, sideways triangle. Um, and this is the center that really governs emotions and also speaks to the nervous system and other aspects. But we're talking about the emotional generative field. So if this was white, you would have inconsistency. You would be able to feel a lot from people who are defined, like me and Ellen. When it's defined, the hypothesis within human design is that there is a particular flow to your emotional state. There is a particular flavor to what you may be emotional about. And there is uh, because it's such a power, it is the most powerful of the awareness centers. If this is in your chart, it's always going to be your emotion, your inner authority. And this means that about half the population has this center guiding their process. And I find this so flippin' fascinating because it seems like I remember when I discovered human design, it was such a confusing thing to get my head around. And there may be reasons for that because my emotional wave is unconscious. But yeah, I'm just curious if yeah, if you have anything to add to that, that might be useful for people to just be aware of as we start to dive into like, what is this? How does this work? What are we speaking to? Yeah.
Yeah. The way that Ra would speak to the emotional center is that there's a chemistry and that a lot of times the way that I speak to the solar plexus center is that often we will experience, as those who are emotionally defined will experience life colored with emotion, whether that's emotional high, emotional low, maybe even like a
Hmm.
plateau, kind of in some cases with my specific channel. But also, I feel a lot of curiosity with the expression of the emotional center because this is where Raw spoke to this is the center that's evolving currently before our eyes. And so, um, Emma, you and I have spoken a little bit about how our understanding of emotions and our understanding of the emotional process really is unfolding in the collective, and we can see that. And so I get really curious personally with this emphasis in my chart. what emotional mastery looks like,
Mm.
where emotions originate, um, what kind of like initiates the wave for people who are emotional, and
Mm.
really to create safety and awareness for those who don't have emotional definition,
Mm.
because it can be very overwhelming for a non-emotional to experience someone in the midst of their wave who is emotional. So those are some things that come up
Yeah,
as you
totally.
ask
I'm
that
just gonna,
question.
this is fun. Let's just have a riff. I'm gonna just speak to like, I love what you say about emotional mastery because I yap on about this in my Instagram sometimes about like if you have definition, it's your responsibility to keep that frequency clear so that you're impacting people with the the gift of your centers rather than distortion. And I feel this most strongly about the emotional center because the impact, it's literally half the population that is going around impacting others with their emotional field. And when you understand the not self of an undefined solar plexus, so if the center was white, there can be a theme around avoiding confrontation and truth. And when you understand the emotional navigation, you can see why that might be the case. Because if somebody's going to share their truth and then an emotional being is going to kick off into a wave, then that unemotional person has to feel all of that amplified. So you can see there's a lot of wisdom in even the not self process of somebody in their mechanics wanting to avoid this amplified experience that they're almost subconsciously aware is going to come from sharing truth. But if we have a population of people that has evolved into this emotional mastery whereby there can be that awareness of the process, because I think it's the center that's so easy to get stuck into the stories. It's like, oh my gosh, you made me feel this, oh my gosh, this thing is the biggest. It's like there is, I love what you said about the Ra speaks to the pure chemistry. There's molecules moving, there's energy moving, and then we have all these stories around it. So as this center continues to come to more awareness, I think it'll be really impactful to be a lot for a lot of the undefined people out there who find this center quite challenging because there'll be a lot more responsibility within the emotional sphere. And I think, yeah, essentially, you and I as three fives are in the trenches, leading that experiment because with that 3-5 profile, there's so much about diving into it, right? I feel like we've talked about this before of just almost having no fear in some way. And you and I both have a completely undefined spleen. So what is fear? I mean, I'm curious. I'm really curious about this in your experience when you discovered human design. Was there a piece as you understood the emotional process and this being the authority? Was there a piece of like recognition and kind of coming home to that? How did that feel when you started to understand that as a guiding force in your life? I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. When I found human design, I felt like it really put a lot of puzzle pieces together for me. And I think specifically to my channel, speaking specifically to my channel,
Mm.
the gate 39, it can be so provocative. Just without me saying anything, I felt, and these are some of the contexts that I have been working through, I think, since I have discovered human design, but that can be a lot for people. And I think it was a lot for the people around me growing up. Um, I was told that I was so emotional as a child and that I was often so dramatic. And so now I can say that with a smile, but at the time it was hard for me to understand,
Yeah.
okay, what do I do with that?
Yeah. I wonder if there were pieces of, is there something wrong with me?
Yes, yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Totally.
Um, and then I think currently It really is, it's such a digesting experience for me. Like the way that
Yeah.
I am experiencing life, it requires me to really take time to digest things. And
Mhm.
the awareness of human design also has given me context for how I'm interacting with other people. Because when I'm in maybe a low and I'm experiencing sometimes what feels like the bottom of the ocean in my experience, pulling people into that, choosing to be around people can be really intense for people. And so I
Mhm.
think that there's, like you said, a responsibility that comes with this authority, but then there's so much beauty too. Like
Mm.
I love, I really love the way that I'm designed, and I love getting to experience life as an emotional being because there's such richness in the emotional experience from my purview, from my experience. And yeah, there's so much that could be said about it. But I think that finding human design, I was I was like a for in my 20s, I was constantly looking for ways to understand myself. And so
Mhm.
I looked into Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram and like all these personality typologies to help contextualize my experience. But human design was really the first tool that spoke so poignantly to the truth of what I experience and what I've known to be my consistent frequency from the time
Mhm.
that I can remember, you know?
That's amazing. I love that. You also have such an open chart. Such an this is leading me to my next question because you've only got two out of the nine centers defined. So there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of inconsistency in literally all of the other centers besides your root and your solar plexus. And I have a real curiosity around the emotional wave. And, Ra speaks to it being a mechanical, chemical process that's happening outside of, what Brandon's work in the circle would call the context. So we can have these beliefs, and then that's how we feel about life and ourselves. But I'm really curious if you have anything to speak to this question that I've carried for a long time. How much of my wave is my reaction to the world around me? How much of it is generated within me? It's still a hypothesis that I'm playing with in my own experience, but because of such a lot, like there's so many loud voices within your physical body of all of these different things that you're experiencing around different people and transits. And then you have an emotional wave to potentially react to a lot of that stuff and to have feelings and stories. And yeah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, this is something I've contemplated a lot because I mean, from the understanding of human design, projectors are kind of, especially in our open centers, we're kind of the ones that are taking on the most energetically. So wherever we are, because our aura is penetrating, we're really just taking everything in.
Mhm.
And so as it being with seven open centers, I my hypothesis or what I've experimented with, especially lately, is just becoming aware of conditioning, of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
forces, like in the environments, the transits, the people that I'm around, um, creating awareness of when that conditioning is present. Like I'm around my partner Ronnie, who has his ajna and throat defined. So I'm around him a lot, and I almost notice that mental conditioning and the desire to be like, okay, I think it's really good for us to have time away from each other in our own auras so that some of that deconditioning can happen. And
Yeah.
just honestly, digestion in my own process.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, I mean, originally connecting with you, I was so excited to connect with another 3/5 projector who has interests in German New Medicine and the somatic inquiry work because I feel I loved kind of what you pointed out about kind of having all of that openness. There's room for a lot of context to kind of sprout
Yeah.
up from that experience. Um, whether that's an open ego experience, an open sacral experience, an open throat experience.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited personally just to dive into the integrated somatic inquiry work to use as a tool for my own kind of deconditioning process to be able to come back to the truth of
Yeah.
myself. And I'm curious for you, like what your experience has been with the ISI work and how, yeah, how that has been for you to come back to yourself.
Thank you for that question. I love that as a question because this has been, I feel like us three fives, we have these little science laboratories of ours. We're constantly going through our little experiments and testing things out. And this has been such an interesting experiment for me to layer on. So, for anyone listening, if you have no idea what ISI is, it's integrated somatic inquiry, and it's a process, in my opinion, I call it like matrix tweaking or, perception clearing, whatever you want to call it. But it's basically finding those inner beliefs that you've been living out for a long time and then allowing truth to integrate them into the now. Because usually it's a belief that a 2 year old or 3 year old made that made sense at the time, but isn't actually the full truth. And we can have awareness around them not being true, but if our body still believes it, then we just live that out until we get a chance to shift that. So, as I've been digging through this work and studying it with Brandon Bozarth, I've found interesting experiences shifting in my emotional wave because I've started to see that I can have an emotional reaction to something. And then as I take that trigger and that moment and take it through inquiry and start to really develop an understanding of what the feeling was, what the truth of that feeling was, and then whether or not it's actually congruent with, the actual truth of life or whether that's a belief that has been layered on. As I've started to do that, I feel like I've been able to get more, it's almost like refining my emotional frequency because I'm taking away a lot of these distortions the way that I see them. Like, you mentioned the ego. Say you have an open ego and you have this sense of it's just an inconsistent experience of worth and determination and things like that. So if there's an inconsistency, there may be a context that comes online that's like, I don't actually know if I'm worthless or if I'm worthy. And then we start to attach, well, if somebody responds to me in this way, then I feel worthy. And then we start chasing those things that give us that response. And you can see the snowball effect that happens when we have these contexts online, that, in my opinion, it kind of starts to clutter the frequency of our natural state. And I feel this most intensely with the emotional process because you can work with the mind and you can work with, the way you express yourself. And these are various other layers to the human design chart. But when you're dealing with emotional frequency, it's like it's your nervous system. It's your reptile brain in some ways, in my mind. Like it's this primal response to life. And it's also through the human design lens, it's this chemical process that your body is designed to continually generate. What I find interesting in that correlation, in that connection of like using integrated somatic inquiry, um, as I would say, as a really potent deconditioning tool, I think it simply speeds up the process of reconnecting with our original frequency. Because, if you, one of the things that I see as a hypothesis in human design is if you're living in alignment, your your frequency that you're emitting, that the colored in parts of your chart is clearer. And if you are constantly making decisions that go against your natural mechanics, those defined places become distorted. So I know people talk a lot about deconditioning and about the not self, and a lot of the time that's connected to the open centers, which is true. But I'm really interested as well in the defined centers and their distortions. And I feel like this is such a big one for emotional beings because honestly, it's such a vast center. You know, it encompasses like the entirety of life, in my opinion. Like you can't really touch anything without touching the solar plexus in a lot of ways because of the way that it influences so much. So this ability to start really, it's almost like surgery of the psyche or something like that, using this inquiry process to be able to get to the essence of ourselves a lot quicker than, and actually, I wouldn't even say that human design is a deconditioning tool in and of itself. I'm just throwing a lot of things out here at you, but Travis was speaking in the projector lounge. Travis Day, he's another projector, and he was speaking to, like, it's an awareness tool, but there's lots of other ways to try and help you back into yourself. And I think that especially for emotional beings, inquiry work is so useful because we're dealing with clearing this distortion within our emotional, the place that we carry a lot of responsibility to, in my opinion. There's a lot that we collect in this place, and it's really interesting. I don't know. I'm curious if you have anything that sort of sticks out in your mind of themes that you've started to notice or patterns where you're like, is that my wave or is that something that I'm kind of carrying in a conditioned sense? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
thank
lot.
you. I resonate a lot though with all that you shared. And I've had this conversation with a few friends of mine that, yeah, also testing the hypothesis of, is human design a deconditioning tool? I don't think so. It's a great awareness tool.
Yeah.
Um, and I love what you shared about the integrated somatic inquiry work because yes, I can identify experiences with my wave where they were triggered by a context, by
Mhm.
an experience that I had, which triggered a belief that's not true about myself and spiraled into emotion. And then I think the way that I can identify with my emotional process outside of maybe the context or being triggered by a belief that I have from maybe early childhood
Mhm.
is kind of just making peace with, it takes a while for me to digest life. It takes a while for me to find full clarity on the truth that I hold about a situation or an experience that I have or a
Mhm.
decision that I need to make. And I have I think since finding human design, I have been practicing making peace with the nature of my wave, which I can relate to, is that it's kind of flat until there's the spike that happens. And maybe the spike is like a high, and that's beautiful. And I feel like that's kind of when the clarity comes for me. I'm like, oh, cool. I can reconnect with like the truth of who I am and the truth of this experience of life and love, really. But to hold that lightly, because all of life, as we know as third lines, life is so full of experience. It can
Yeah.
be full of experience that's like really pleasant and lovely and joyful and exuberant, and experiences that bring a lot of grief and that challenge our perspective on life and that maybe test us a little bit and encourage us to grow from um, in almost like a composting way. But yeah, something that was coming through in my journaling this morning was that there's like all of life is love. It's like it's all to love. That's the point of life, is to experience the richness of all of it. And so
Mm.
I think that that is some of the wisdom that my wave can convey to me or bring to me, is that
Mm.
like hold everything lightly because it's going to change, It's
I love that
there's
so
so
much.
much to experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. Have you felt in your experience, have you had times where you've had a shutdown solar plexus? I mean, your actual solar plexus itself, I can share again here, is unconsciously defined. Uh,
Hmm.
all of your gates are red, same like mine. So there's a sense of sort of maybe it would be easy to override in some ways. I'm curious around that numbness, and maybe also if you can speak to whether or not you've felt in your own like lived experience resistance to either end of your waves, like resistance to going to the lows, resistance to maybe even to receive the highs, if there's like this feeling of I don't know if I can trust it because I know it's not going to last, so like what's the point, or whatever that might have looked like in your journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel as though perhaps when I was most disconnected from myself and from life is when I felt the most emotionally numb.
Mm,
And in my early 20s, there was a big transition for me from living in the place that I grew up, knowing everyone in my hometown, being from a family of 7 children, living on a farm. Like there was just so much that was a part of my experience then that is not a part of my experience now. And there was a lot of resistance that I met whenever I was like, okay, it's time for me to fly. I want to move away. Um, and that was kind of a dark period in my life and a period where I touched depression in a way that I don't know if I've touched in other, like I think it was the longest experience of depression that I had. And I think that was when I felt the most emotionally numb and or resistant to my emotional process.
mm,
And and yes, I mean that there's probably been a lot of resistance to the emotional lows because they can be uncomfortable.
mm,
Um, and I think specifically in experiences when there was an awareness on my part and I was in a very emotional low place and I was around other people who were reflecting that back to me and almost uncomfortable. Like, this is really hard for, the people around me to experience. I
yeah.
think that there was probably some self-devaluation because I was associating my lows, I was taking them personally and I was making them mean something about myself.
Mm,
And yeah, what you said about the solar plexus being such a vast center to explore, I that feels so true because this center for me has been the center I've been most curious about in like all of the centers in human design because it feels like it almost holds this gravity that the
mm.
other centers don't necessarily have.
It's almost
Um,
like it's sentient, right? The others
yeah,
doing their things, they've got their place, they've got their process, and then the solar plexus is on the side, just like freaking out.
I'm doing whatever I want.
Yeah. I think I've heard Ra speak to it as being it is the spiritual center. And I know I've worked with clients who have this, very undefined, completely open, whatnot, and there is an aspect to being able to channel, I want to say, just the vastness that's able to be experienced within this realm. And then if you have this as a consistent frequency, um, yeah, it's not a consistent frequency in the sense that your root center is going to be pulsing, right? It's got its energy, it's a motor center, it's doing its thing, but I feel like you really can feel the solar plexus evolving. It's it's shifting.
100%.
The awareness is increasing, and you can see that on a global level. You can see the emotional intelligence of the world, if you want to call it that, like shifting, not always for good. There's all sorts of things going on there, but like there's movement, there is awareness that continues to come in through this realm. And it's freaking fascinating. I loved what you shared there. I'm really curious about have you have you had an evolution or like a scientific experiment running with actual decision making? Because when we're speaking about the emotional authority and it being the authority inside for half the population, I remember I feel like it took me a very long time to even start to get a handle on what is clarity? How long do I wait? clarity over time. How many waves do I wait up and down waves like 3 times? I did a lot of trial and error in the sense that I would get actually, yeah, I'm going to ask you this as well. Like, have you made decisions on your highs, decisions on your lows, and then gotten bitter after it? Because I know just after I found human design, like I was starting to become open to invitations and getting opportunities coming to me and taking them, and then being like in the situation realizing I'm being recognized for being a generator and going like, oh, I thought it was a yes. But yeah, tell me about how that's been in your experiment.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I that feels really true to my experience. It's interesting, my relationship with human design has evolved as, as I'm evolving and as, like collectively we're seeing emotions and our awareness of emotions evolve, but I felt that also personally. But I typical third line fashion, I found human design. I just nose dove into it and studied it really nonstop for like over a year and listened read books and listened to podcasts and all the things. And then, almost in a fifth line way, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it all down. I'm going to put it all down. And I'm just
Break
going
the
to like,
bond.
yes, I'm going to break the bond. Yep. Break the bond and see what happens. And in, it was an interesting experience also digesting all of the information around being a projector and
Mm,
that my experience actually feels maybe quite different than most of the population. And I don't have the energy to work as I once did.
mm,
Um, but yes, I've accepted a lot of invitations that I didn't necessarily wait on. Um, and that, got me into situations where I became very burnt out and I, worked like a generator or tried to prove myself, like prove that I am good enough to be in, whatever bond or whatever dynamic. I would say a lot of the dynamics for me in this realm have been around work and what it means to work as a projector.
yeah,
Um, but
which
yeah,
yeah,
go
which
ahead.
I've just been thinking about for both of us we're energy projectors, and it's almost I feel in some ways I'm such like a whinger and a whiner. But I was melodramatic. Please excuse me. But
The emotional beings. We're just
yeah.
I welcome the drama.
Um, but this aspect of challenge around having these energy centers, but needing to wait for the invitation for the energy to actually be able to flow. And I feel like this is so interesting and challenging because it's like you can be this bottled up ball of something. It's not work hard energy. It's like there is movement within me. But and I think maybe this is why, especially having the emotional authority and having this energetic aspect of like motors defined, I'm here to do something with it. We can jump at invitations that are half digested because we need to move this energy. And so it's like it's been waiting. I'm just going to share the thingy again because I'm probably going to rewatch this and be like, why did I whinge so much? But waiting is something that I haven't been very comfortable with. And if you look at my undefined route, it's lit up like a Christmas tree. Like I've got so many
Mm,
gates just
wow.
trying to hook me up and have that center firing. And patience and time has been such a challenging and painful third line experience, in my opinion, and also kind of fun because I feel like it's given me access almost to slip into a different timeline, time zone situation. When you start to develop more awareness around the solar plexus, I had an experience this week actually where something came to me, like an invitation came to me, and I'd actually been digesting that decision for a while. But if I hadn't had the awareness that I was a projector and there is this energetic sphere of waiting for the invitation. If I had just initiated, if I had just gotten the impulse, gotten the idea, and then done something straight away with it, the flow would have been completely different. It possibly wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have nourished in the way that it ended up coming to me. And I feel like once you start to be able to develop that different relationship with time, things become a lot easier when you have a wave. Because for anyone new who doesn't know what we're talking about, when you have this inner authority in human design and it's guiding your decision, so you get something come to you and you start to feel through your body if that's actually correct or not. And the emotional process, because your emotional wave is constantly moving, you're in a different lens. Like the way that you see life is filtered through the emotions at any given point in time. So the process of waiting is really important for emotional beings so that they're able to see through all of the different layers of the lens to be able to get more of an understanding of the actual decision that's in front of you. So yeah, do you have anything to speak to in terms of time, your experience with time, and then maybe how that's shifted as you've had more awareness come through around that solar plexus space for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you shared. I also, yeah, have compassion for that open route with all of those hanging gates, just like reaching for something to hold on to. I have a friend who used to say, no route, no rush. Remember that. Um,
No roots, so much rush.
I know. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think my experience with time, I think, yeah, having two centers that have energy to move and being like all of my variables are left, my
Yeah.
environment is active.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was surprised learning about my design, like hearing the narrative of like, oh, you don't have as much energy. I'm like, I'm the person taking a hike every day, cleaning my house, doing all the things. Um, but when it comes to the process of digesting life, I think I have started to create awareness around, okay, I can just let go of my need to know when the clarity will come or have
Mm-hmm.
certainty, like have any certainty around when the clarity will show up for me because I think coming into closer relationship with my intuitive self, like my internal experience, I've seen with this trial and experience um, that I have that the answer always comes whenever it needs to, and that if it's correct, the people who are giving like presenting these invitations will be able to wait. And if not, that's okay, you know? That has definitely been a part of my process. And I think in light of the experiences that I've had where I have made decisions without waiting to digest, I've learned, okay, it's actually really good for me whenever I take my time and
Mm-hmm.
really am able to sit with the truth and allow, like you said, who knows how many emotional cycles it take before the truth comes. But it's almost like I imagine a painting and I'm like watching the painting just like slowly be filled in to where the picture becomes more and more clear as the painting is being filled in. Um, and I've had actually two really beautiful experiences with bonds as a third line where I broke the bond with two individuals who were aware of human design and we just took time. We were like, okay, let's just take some time away from each other and let, all of this kind of settle without attaching to, okay, are we going to, return to this bond or not? What will that look like? And it's been, those two experiences were really beautiful because in perfect timing, I've returned to both of those bonds and they're as a third line, there's something new there that wasn't there before we broke the bond. So I think as I've experimented with all of this, I've learned to trust that my digestion will take its own time and then I'll have clarity when it's correct. But yeah, also as an emotional being with just that one channel, the most consistent symptoms for me in my physical body always have to do with my digestion, always. So that's like really interesting for me to gain clarity around or just to like trust my body that like, yeah, maybe my digestion's a little uncomfortable, but this is my body just in the process that it needs to be
Mm.
in digesting life.
Yeah, digesting life. It's interesting listening to you speak like that. It's like there's this process of, especially maybe when we discover human design and understand how things mechanically may work within us, and then we start to try and figure it out with our mind. And it's almost like I definitely felt this in my experience. Like my mind wanted to extract the answer from my solar plexus. It's like give me the clarity, please. Um, but as you become more embodied, and I do feel like that, it's like you become more aware of how you feel around people, how you feel within your wave. And I feel like your awareness of German new medicine must be quite helpful for this as well, just with that quintessence, having trust around the body's processes and timing. Quintessence really is this sort of divine timing of being able to having all of this awareness really just helps the mind to let the body do its thing, doesn't it? Like handing the trust back into things that aren't always understandable with the mind. Yeah. Um, there was one thing I've been meaning to ask you. Let me have a quick look. I'm curious if you could maybe just like share, if you're up for it, share some of what it feels like to live with your wave, because yours is an individual wave. It's an individual circuitry, and it has from like this is just so funny reading about people's emotional experiences. Like hypothetically you feel moodiness at times. Hypothetically you feel bursts of joy, but I want to hear from the horse's mouth, like what do those emotional flavors, and this is coming from somebody who's tribal, so a lot of my emotional experiences relate to people. I'll feel aloneness, and I'll feel really friendly, and I'll feel like all of my music themes are around love songs and like very relational stuff, whereas you've got an emotional feel to yourself, but it's a different flavor to mine. So I'm really curious, yeah, how does that feel?
Yeah, it does seem to just kind of be operating on its own. It can be, like I said, it can be triggered by context at times. If I'm with other people or in situations that might trigger contexts that I've held. But I could just be living my life and I notice, wow, I feel really moody or I feel like, just wavy. Like, okay, well, nothing feels exciting. Nothing feels it's it's kind of the I really relate to what is written about with the individual circuitry of being melancholy. A lot of times my emotional lows just feel like melancholy, just like you're sitting by a rainy window and you're like, oh man, I like what is there? Also being direct light determination. It's interesting because like if it's raining, a lot of times I'll just be like crying. I'm like, "Oh, the sun is gone. I'm
Ah.
just crying now." Um,
Oh my
and then
God.
I can have a laugh about it later,
Yeah.
once the moodiness settles. But it does just feel like it has its own its own experience that's moving and shifting. And I think I get curious about, especially as I'm moving into embodying myself more and more and living as myself as a projector, what the impact will be for other people to
Mm,
witness my process as a third line, but as an
yeah.
emotional third line with an individual wave. And yeah, it's interesting to try to put words to the experience, but it is, I do relate, like it, for the most part, it's pretty flat. Like, I think most people who haven't spent a lot of time around me and may not know human design would be like, oh, she's not very emotional. But then if they saw me in a wave or in like a spike, they'd be like, whoa, who's that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Do
but
you, with your lows, do you feel yourself intuitively maybe seeking solitude in them? Do you feel like,
yes.
yeah, I'm curious about that because I mean, so the gate in my ego is the gate of aloneness. And I've felt for a lot of my life like it's easy to bring my friendliness and my upwaves to people, but there's been this withdrawing process in the lows, and I wonder if it's almost this like solar plexus wisdom of the impact I want to have, the conditioning I want to have, like I want to bring the good stuff to my tribe or whatever it is. Maybe there's shame around difficult emotions, or if they're difficult for us, the impact, like you spoke to this earlier about people feeling like, whoa, that's so intense, like you're so intense, just feeling a lot when you're in the depths of that, and then having this process. I don't know if it's necessary to be in solitude. I don't know if that's a contextualized thing, but it's just really interesting to be able to notice that flow and then how we kind of play that out in our lives.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think over the looking at my life with the arc of my experience, when I experienced that from a lot of the adults around me as a child, it
Mm,
did cause me to feel shame around my emotions and kind of this desire to withdraw because I could see the impact that maybe it was really uncomfortable for other people to experience.
mm,
And that I've done a lot of work, healing work around shame in relation to my emotional wave. And I think just intuiting what is needed. Because at times, I mean, I have three placements in 40 as well. It's my design moon and then my two Jupiter placements.
oh yeah.
I get curious about this concept of solitude and when is it correct for me to kind of be with myself and allow that process just to happen without needing to pull someone into it or maybe needing to be witnessed in it. And I have a dear friend who also has the 3955 wave, and there is such a kindredness in connecting over
Mm.
the companionship that we share in the experience of that wave in our unique ways.
Yeah, so you
But
wouldn't necessarily feel the need like to have somebody like that in your space. Maybe in a low
mhm,
it's is resonant. Is that how you?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so that has actually been really healing because
Mm,
I can express the depths of the low of my experience to
yeah.
someone who has been there too. And
Yeah.
so intuiting, I think when it's appropriate, when there is capacity on the part of another person to meet me
Mm,
there
mhm.
without necessarily attaching to it. Um, but yeah, just anyone, I probably, yeah, wouldn't be like, oh, I want you to see me cry, you know? Um,
Not the exhibitionist.
exactly. And that I think that's part of my own healing work is to when it feels correct to allow myself to be witnessed
Mm,
in the entirety of my experience
mm,
beyond just, "Oh, I'm high, like, you're gonna enjoy this, so I'm gonna bring it to you." But
totally.
also just allowing for my own process without shame or, like, feeling like I need to hide with it.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a big thing as a 3-5 profile. I feel like you and I are really on, yeah, we're queens of the castle when it comes to craziness because it's like being an emotional projector, intense, being a 3-5 profile, intense. You've got literally all of your centers almost open, intense. And then quad left, I feel like must be kind of a trip as well. Just so focused with
Mhm.
all of it. But I'd love to hear a little bit about your third line experience because this for me, I think, has maybe been one of the places where I've been most contextualized. I've had so many stories around shame, um, in my own experience around trying things that didn't get me the results that I wanted and seeing that as failure. And I know there's a quote that Ra has about like, is it 3-5s? Yeah, 3-5 profile is the most likely to just leave their hometown and never come back and live on the other side of the world. And I so relate to that. And actually, I've recently just moved back to New Zealand, and it's been really interesting because I've had so much time to process a lot of these things and realizing my shame around pivoting around even breaking bonds with knowledge. Like I loved how you spoke to breaking that bond with human design, being like, screw this, I'm just gonna do my own thing. But like having that little mad scientist that you can't really get rid of because we're made like this, and then also being able to deal with the shame stories around it to allow connection. Because for me, I feel like when you speak to the German new medicine side of things, I've had a lot of separation conflict themes in my life of wanting closeness but also not wanting closeness, or wanting to break a bond but feeling like I couldn't break a bond. And a lot of that in the way that I see it through these various lenses is related to things like third line shame, and maybe even having that reflected back to us from people who are quite critical about our process. And then the shadow side of that for me was a lot of perfectionism. And I think I see that in some ways when I want to bring my up wave to people, but I don't want to bring my down wave to people. It's the sense of perfection of like, this is acceptable. This is what will get me belonging, what will make me worthy as a person, this joy that I can bring. And then I'll hide the rest of myself, and then I'll wonder why I don't feel connected to people. And it's like, well, who's beginning that abandoning process at the, it's me and my self-censorship based on these beliefs. But I'm really curious about your third line process, and if I don't feel like I've even shared all of my third line shame and hung it out to dry yet, because it's a process of allowing that to unfold in quintessence. Maybe I'm using that, I'm not sure, but um, allowing that story to be told, I find so powerful. And I love that. I love that Ra kind of kicks us in the butt and says, if you're not sharing your experiences, you're stealing from the world the knowledge that you came here to find out. And I'll throw that your side to share some of the
Yeah, I
awareness.
mean, I can so relate to all that you shared. And yeah, I mean, my own process has been very interesting in relation to my third line experience. And from a young age, being told by my mom, like, you don't hesitate ever. You just jump in and you don't even think about it. This could be a problem. And I'm like, yeah, but like I can't help it. This is just
Yeah.
how I am. Um, and really, I mean, in my third line process, breaking bonds in an emotionally messy way at times, and
Yeah.
really healing shame around what that looked like, knowing that I needed to break the bond, but not having really the awareness of myself and how to do it correctly in a way that didn't look as messy. But that's part of experimentation. And I think that, yeah, I'm also making peace with sometimes when you're in your laboratory, as you say, I it gets messy and like things are very
Totally.
messy.
Yeah.
Um, like
There's
even
overgrowth
this
in a
is
petri dish.
yes, exactly. Like I'm a perfect metaphorical thing memory that I have from my childhood whenever I was in school. I was homeschooled most of my childhood, but whenever I was in school and I would be coloring a page, the teacher came up and was like, color inside the lines. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. I'm not this I don't understand boundaries, you know? Like I'm here to test them. I'm here to see where the walls are, to see where the edges are of the experience. And this has been true of my work. Like I have done so many different types of jobs. I have been a nurse. I have like fulfilled that role in so many capacities. I see myself getting into a normal job and then a year later being like, I'm so bored. I need to do something else. And then I break the bond and I move on to something else.
Your life
And
CV must be just a horrific thing for people to look like. Employers like, what are you doing with your life?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, I don't, luckily, like, yeah, I'm noticing lately. Also, I think being able to witness other third lines has been really beautiful for me and very healing because I'm starting to recognize that other third lines, specifically other 3/5s, have like this vast richness of experience that they can speak from that
Yeah.
almost makes me trust them more because I'm like, oh, you've been there. Like, you haven't just been
Yeah.
there intellectually, you have really lived what it's like to just jump in and try new things all the time. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think sometimes with my third line experience or my most recent experience where I broke a bond and it was kind of like it was a big emotional experience for me and it did bring up some of that third line shame. I just allowed myself a lot of time to digest it and process it before I'm like throwing myself into another thing, but it just didn't feel correct yet to throw myself into another thing. And
Hmm.
then I was laying in bed the other night and I was like, my mind was reeling a little bit, but then I was like, you know what? I think it's time. I think it's time for me to jump into something new. Um, but yeah, I think I'm starting to understand that it is valuable because I'm in the process of rewriting the story that oh, I've just, kind of like set off bombs everywhere that I've been in my life
Yeah.
when that's not true. I know
Yeah.
it's not true because I can see that so much was learned and not only on my part but also on the part of the other people that were involved.
Yeah.
Um and that this can be a gift that I will pull from. And something that I think is important for third lines or important for my own experience is that sometimes as a third line, I feel like, when am I going to make it? Like, when am I going to when is the trial going to stop? And I'm just going to figure it out. But the truth is, that may never happen. And so I'm being reminded, like, it's okay to just jump in and not have high expectations that something is going to go a specific way. And maybe that's kind of where some of the shame kicks in for me because if I am jumping into something new and I have an expectation, then I have an
Mm.
attachment to how it should turn out.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not the third line process, you know?
Totally. And I would almost say maybe that's a distortion of the frequency of a third line because
Mhm.
was listening to something from Ra the other day talking about like if you leave a third line kid to do their thing, they will discover everything there is to discover about the thing that they're interested in. And it brought me back to that joy of that process because I was homeschooled as well for most of my life and I didn't necessarily always have this idea that there was something wrong with me. I feel like when I was 12 and we moved to New Zealand from Zimbabwe, and I started to become aware of people and culture and like, what the hell am I doing? I'm like just watching people trying to figure out how to be. But there's this whole process of self-censoring and like trying to be perfect and acceptable and belong and loved and all that sort of stuff. But prior to that, I can see that third line child in my process. And there's such a, it's like I get excited to learn. I get excited to discover what is there to discover. Like, with the inquiry work I've been studying, what can we do with this? It's like, let me take it apart. Let me see how it works. Let me see where I can put this and use it, and what happens when I use it. And then what happens when you use it in this way. And it's like, all of a sudden, I don't know if it's this process. I'm sure it'll catch me out in many other ways, but it's like I can start to get these glimpses and these glimmers of the third line in its natural state without all of this contextualized process, because it's so quick, that process of somebody maybe disapproves of you because of the way that you've done something, and it's literally just been you and your third line process, like coloring outside of the lines. It's like, well, that's not appropriate. Well, okay, I'm not appropriate. It's this very quick
Mm.
jump, especially as a small person, to build these ideas around who you are and how you function and how it's wrong and there's something wrong with it. And then for, I feel like this third lines are gonna we're gonna mess around and find out in one way or another. So we're either gonna do this in a dysfunctional way, where we're trying really hard to have the perfect life and to build the thing that we think that we have to do, but it's still not going to work because we're third lining. We're built like this. So the attempt to
Mhm.
not be a third line is going to be third lined. Just newsflash for all of you guys who may be stuck in that process. But if the resistance is removed, the process of being that third line has a lot of joy and a lot of just curiosity towards life. And I think there is the shadow side of being cynical and feeling just really discouraged. You've gotten to the bottom of everything. Like, you've gotten to the thing that doesn't work with everything. But that's not the full picture. You've discovered a lot about everything. And I love what you say in terms of listening to other third lines and other 3/5s to be able to almost pull that richness out, because I know there's so many third lines that don't speak. They don't really want to talk about a lot of the things that they've been through because of that shame filter. But when you can get them one on one, or there's a confidence in there and they're happy to talk about some of the things they've experienced, it's so, so rich what body of work they've essentially scientifically collected their whole life.
And entertaining. It's very
Yeah.
entertaining.
Yeah, totally. That was probably one of my favorite things when I was studying human design and business with my mentor, and she was like, "Your branding is a third line, is humor." I was like, "Yes,
Yes.
I have an excuse for memes." This is part of
Yes.
my
I love all
branding.
of your memes.
Yeah. But no,
Totally.
truly, it's
Yes.
that
I mean,
ability to kind of laugh at yourself, right?
yeah. Because what else to do? I mean, we're emotional beings, so we'll probably cry too, but like the laughter is so important.
Totally.
Um, and yes, yeah, I really, I had an insight come through recently that it really feels like the third line frequency is here to kind of like push evolution forward because we we're not really meant to be in one place for very long. We're like always curious to learn more and to experience more and to expand our capacity and get to the bottom of things in our experiential way. And, like maybe we'll fall into some ditches, but hopefully we'll laugh about it later. Um, and I think rewriting my own expectation for me to arrive at some point, um, when that's probably not going to be the truth of my experience, but hopefully I can just laugh a lot along the way and have a
Yeah,
lot
I
of really
wonder
great stories to tell.
I think for me, I love what you say about that arriving piece. And I'm like throwing a little bit of inquiry here on myself, but like when I when I have that desire of it's almost like a tiredness. I'm really tired
Hmm.
of things not going well or not going the way that I had hoped. And um as I've started to, how I was talking about shifting timelines into more of my emotion, like letting my emotional solar plexus actually guide my timeline, there's space for the resting to allow for the hungriness for the next experiment. And it starts to become a process of that's that I'm here for the journey more so. Um, it's still in progress, I think, in my life, but I feel like that's a really big piece of the third line process of yeah, I'm tired. I'm tired of
Hmm.
the pace of life and of things just not working out right. And yeah, I wonder, I mean, human design will offer the hypothesis of tuning back into your nature, into your strategy, into your authority. Because I do think that there's more or there's less pain involved in that third line process, depending on whether something's correct for you. So I spent a lot of time, I've got that undefined spleen as well in my life, and I spent a lot of time third lining a lot of health stuff and in the process causing a little bit of damage to myself with my really radical experiments. And it's been really interesting observing my process coming back into, like how you're saying, your interest in the solar plexus. We're really here to emit our frequency, who we are. And I wonder if as we come back into more sort of embodied in ourselves and in that natural process and the mechanics following our inner authority, whether our experiments shift to a state of the things that really light us up rather than just kind of like trying and failing in places that we're not actually designed to have consistency. Yeah, it's a real different
I
trip.
love that. Yeah. I mean, it really feels, I've had the intuitive clarity that this inquiry work and, in relationship to deconditioning, perhaps,
Mm,
feels like it just completely changes your experience of life. And what would it look like if, I mean, I can so relate to the third line experience of just being like, I'm so tired, but
yeah.
also like reflecting on something I've been doing, like reflecting on the last year or so. At one point, I was like working 20 hours a week, involved in like two other projects and like doing something else. And I'm like, what was I doing? Like there was a lot of me trying to prove myself and just as a third line being so willing to jump into so many things to see if they could bring me success. But
Yeah.
what would it look like if I was able to almost detach from this need to prove myself or to kind of work in a sacral way. And when I feel tired, to just rest, to read a book, to like lay in
Yeah.
the sun, to allow myself to really slow down and trust that just like I felt laying in bed the other night, like, oh, I think I have energy to try something new. That
Mm,
felt correct. And
yes.
it does feel like there's a difference in frequency of the third line almost just jumping into out of the contexts that we have held about ourselves versus kind of like waiting with our, for you and me, waiting with our emotional way, waiting with our digestion for
Mhm.
when there's energy for the new
Mm,
thing.
yeah. I feel like that's a new insight that feels really important about that. Like, are you third lining your not self or are you third lining your authentic nature? Because I think that's possibly what contributed to a lot of my sense of shame and even just that sort of existential fear of like, I'm not going to survive as myself. I remember working, oh gosh, like 10 night duties in a row in emergency when I was a nurse and just feeling like
Wow.
so afraid. So afraid, like I don't think I'm gonna survive. I can't survive like other people. And my like how I was saying, you can't really switch that third line off. You're going to figure out what you're going to figure out. But I was doing that in a state of pretending to be a sacral when I don't have that energetic capacity. So I was third lining my not self. And
Hmm.
I think it builds this sense of I'm a failure when you're third
Yeah.
lining your not self. That's like a poor use of a third line. But if there's inner authenticity and inner congruency with our actual frequency, that's when the scientist comes online, like all of the stuff that you've been delving into and the work that you're exploring and like starting to bring to the world. That's there's a need to understand the depths of that sort of stuff, and I feel like that's where the third line, the real magic comes online, when it's brought back from all of those contexts, brought back from the not self and the open centers, and really expressed through the frequency that you have access to. I'm really excited about this idea.
Yeah, me too.
Mm,
Because I mean, ultimately, like even when we were third lining or not self, there was so much that we learned and that can now be translated to share with the world and hopefully, yeah, maybe offer some sort of service like, oh, maybe it's not so fun to third line your not self. So
yeah.
here's
If
a
you're a projector, you
here's a
probably
practical solution instead.
yes, I love that. Yeah, totally. It's so beautiful.
Hmm.
Oh,
Hmm.
girl, I could talk to you for a very long time,
Wow.
which is good because I'm just gonna have to get you back on here for like 2.0.
Yeah. I would love that.
Yeah. Any
Thank you so
last,
much. This was, yeah. Any last thoughts?
yeah, any last thoughts, any feelings? How does it all feel?
I think I just feel really grateful for this invitation and for this opportunity to, as we've been talking about, share with the world some of what we've learned and um, start to really, like for me, integrate a lot of the learning, the uncomfortable lessons in life, and for this to be, yeah, hopefully useful to whoever is listening and um, yeah, just the opportunity to express myself in a way that feels really authentic to me and and to share some, yeah, just some like companionship and kinship in the resonance that we have in our experiences,
Mm,
which is why I think I felt really drawn to you. So thank you for this podcast and thank you for the opportunity
mm.
just to share some of my experience and what I'm learning along the way.
I'm so delighted to have you. And you've got your fingers in some really cool pies. So maybe tell us, tell everyone, where can they find you? I'll obviously have links in the show notes, but what are you excited about right now?
Yes.
What are you involved in? Where are your spaces that you play?
Thank you. Yeah, I co-founded this tool for learning German New Medicine and connecting with practitioners who work with German New Medicine. So that is called the German New Medicine Collective, and it's at the germannewmedicinecollective.com. There's also a podcast in which I interview all of the practitioners in our space and talk to them about all the modalities they use in addition to German New Medicine with their work. And I am in construction currently of my website that will be ellencomromi.com. So I'll send you the link. It's not live currently, but it will be very soon, where I will be hosting just my third line experimentation, one-on-one sessions that I will offer with people. And then, yeah, just some fun things that I create, like some PDF guides to the menstrual cycle, a cookbook, hopefully, and then some like wild crafted herbal products from my home here in the mountains. And then finally, you can find me if you are on Instagram at Eden Ellen Marie. And I'm on the right angle cross of Eden, so that's where that
Yeah,
name
I
comes
saw
from.
that.
So,
Love that.
mhm.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Hey, stay
you're
on the
so
line
welcome.
and I'll wrap this up. Please subscribe, guys, if you like this. Leave a comment, say hi, leave your questions because, like I said, I plan to have Ellen back. If you're curious about more of her design, we can dig into some aspects of that, her lived experience. This whole conversation that I love is really about how somebody has lived out these mechanics, their life experience, all of that. So I love it. I hope you guys love it. Keep stick around and we will have some more really cool conversations coming up.
Yes, thank you so much, Emma.